Okay, hello everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. It's at the top of the hour, and hopefully, as people kind of trickle in, they'll be able to join us for this really exciting event. My name is William Kuhn. I probably know most of you, but I just like to express my real excitement for today. There's been a lot of work that has gone into this for many months, and you're going to hear some of that work in our first little portion this morning. Second, I'd like to just express how grateful I am to all of the people who are in attendance, all the people who have helped put the work groups together, have attended work group sessions, and put a lot of thought and heart into this effort and what we're trying to achieve. And then lastly, just as by way of introducing the day, I'd also like to express just how inspired I am. I am so amazed at the work that's happening here, the really thoughtful and smart conversations happening. I've had the really great pleasure of being able to listen to several of the working group presentations, and it's been really inspiring thinking forward about what's coming for the state. So I'm going to do a quick some housekeeping issues, and then we'll do some introductions. So we are in Zoom. Many of you are familiar with Zoom, but we're in a webinar now. So that means that right now your mic and your video have been turned off, but later in this session, there will be an opportunity for some more back and forth, and we'll cover that in a little bit. So if you've ever been in a Zoom situation with me, you'll know that I love the chat. So I can see everybody introducing themselves in the chat right now. If you haven't already, please do open up that chat. Let us know who you are, who you're with, and where you're tuning in from today. That chat is going to be a really rich spot for continued discussion, for questions, and for resources. So if over the course of today, you are hearing something and you can think of a newspaper article or a journal article or a website or a YouTube video, drop it in that chat. I'll be doing that, and hopefully you guys will pick up on that too. We have a Q&A function, so if you have a very specific question for a panelist, use that Q&A function, and we can either write back to you or address it live. If you use the Q&A, that is like a sure way to make sure that the question gets through. If you put your question in the chat, we're going to try and pick it up, but it might just be a little harder. The last thing that I'll just share is that we're going to be sharing a presentation for the entire session today. So right now, you should see me on the right side of the screen. And if you don't, there's a little slider bar, and you can grab that slider bar and slide and right. And then that will make the speakers either bigger or the panelists smaller. So if you've got any questions, just type it into the chat, tech issue, tech question, and I will try and answer those for you. Okay. Here's our schedule for the next couple days. So today we are in this opening session. We're going to be here for about a half a day for a couple hours. We have some scheduled breaks. You'll see that in a minute. Tomorrow and the next day, we've got several focus sessions that are optional and a kind of attendance as available / interested. So tomorrow we've got open office hours, which is basically a time for anybody to come in, jump into a meeting and have a chat. Then we have water safety, life jackets, and data tomorrow. And then on the 11th, we've got an open office hours session very specific to the structure and governance of the Future Water Safety Coalition. And then, lifeguards, barriers, and rescue. I'd like you all to note that the rescue and CPR focus group session has been updated. It was scheduled for the 11th at 11 or 11:30, and it is now at 2 p.m. So please note that change. And then next week, we'll have another open office hour session on Monday, and then we'll close all of that up with another session 1 week from today. Okay, today we're going to do some introductions. We're going to review some data. There's been a lot of work that's gone into a pretty in-depth desktop landscape review of the water safety sector in California that you're going to hear. And then as we move into the second and third part of the day, we're going to move into this more dialogue portion where the working groups are going to report out. You might have been sitting in a working group. This is your opportunity to hear what's been happening in the other working groups. Absorb that, comment on that, reflect on that, and offer your ideas. And there's going to be a lot of overlap today, which is not a bad thing, but this is where we can start to synthesize lots of conversations that have been happening independently into one movement as we move forward. And then we'll finish off the day with some concluding remarks and then some housekeeping issues for what's coming up. Okay, logistics done. I would like to start today by inviting Chris Carlson to join us. Chris is with the Ben Carlson Memorial and Scholarship Foundation, which has been absolutely essential in getting this work off the ground. So welcome, Chris.
Oh, good morning, Will, and welcome to all of you. And thanks for all the work that many of you have already put into the California Water Safety Coalition. Most of you have been involved with public safety for most of your lives. It was the career path that you chose. But for some of us that are here today, we had no idea that drowning prevention was something we would be involved with. People like Julie LaPiccolo from the Jasper Ray Foundation and Karen Cohn from the Zach Foundation and myself were abruptly put into this space as a result of tragic accidents. One of my many experiences in the wake of my son's accident was first a realization of just how many families have been affected by drownings. Another experience was how many of these people in the aftermath of these tragedies were using their resources and talents to reduce the risk of this happening to other families. But I also realized that many of these efforts, whether they were individuals or foundations or government agencies, were often not aligned, and sometimes they were even in conflict. So I started to talk with some really smart people about this, people like Julie and John Moore and Rob Williams and Will Kuhn. And I think it was Will who said, Chris, I think you're right. Let's try and align and harness this energy. So in 2019, we held the Southern California Water Safety Summit. I think many of you were there with the intention of bringing many of these California groups together to find out what we might do to work better and to get things done. We were surprised by the positive response of the people and how they really wanted to continue working within this framework. So significant planning then went into the preparation of the 2020 Water Safety Summit. And then we had a pandemic. But COVID, while causing the cancellation of the 2020 Safety Summit after a lot of work went into it, also gave us some time to regroup and connect with some important people. Julie introduced us to Megan Ferraro and Karen Cohn of the Zach Foundation, and then the Zach Foundation introduced us to ASG consultants, Matthew and Mike, who many of you have been working with already. And as a result, a very strong foundation is being built to support the California water safety effort. So no matter how we got here, the important thing is that we are here and that we still have much important work left to do. I hope you all have a great week, and that as a result of it, you'll have a rejuvenated sense of purpose and direction to the critical work that you are taking on. So thanks again for being here, and I hope you all have a great day.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you for your leadership and your guidance and your support in this space. Just a quick note, when you guys are in the chat, there is a little blue box there that says, would you like to send your note to panelists, hosts and panelists only, or to everyone? Just make sure that you're hitting those chats to everyone. Okay, moving on. It is my honor to introduce Karen Cohn from the Zach Foundation, who has been also quite instrumental in our efforts here in California. So welcome, Karen.
Good morning, Will. Thank you so much for having me, and good afternoon to everyone else. Megan Ferraro and I are joining you from the East Coast, so it's a little bit later for us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Karen Cohn, and I am the co-founder of the Zach Foundation. My husband and I co-founded the Zach Foundation after we lost our son, Zachary. He was 6 years old, and he died in our backyard pool as a result of a pool drain entrapment. And we did not want another family to have to endure the loss of a child, so we began and named the foundation in his honor. His name is Zachary Archer Cohn. So shortly after Zachary passed away, the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act was passed, which kicked off our advocacy work. After a few years of running programming, we established some national partnerships with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, as well as the American Red Cross. And that began our national work across the country. We always believed that the crisis of drowning needed to be solved by individual communities. And as a result of that, it prompted us to start regional drowning prevention action plans. And we did this in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where we are from, St. Louis, Missouri, Chicago, Illinois, as well as Central Texas. And as a result of that work, it led us to the opportunity to partner with the Ben Carlson Memorial Foundation so that we could share the lessons learned from our previous drowning prevention action work here in the state of California. The ZAC Foundation is honored to be a part of this work and to have the opportunity to be here today as part of the workshop. We really look forward to the success of the coalition and are so happy to be included in this great work that all of you from the state of California have already been a part of. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Karen, so much for your support and your involvement in this really exciting process. So next, I would like to introduce Rob Williams and Megan Ferraro to join us. Rob and Megan are going to help set the stage a little bit for some of the work that has gone into not only today, but to drowning prevention kind of in California for a long time. So Rob and Megan have both been mentors to me, and I've been really grateful to work with them over the past couple months on this project. So Rob and Megan, thank you.
Thanks, Will. Good afternoon, everybody. My name, I think pretty much everybody should know me, but my name is Rob Williams. I'm here with Megan Ferraro from the ZAC Foundation. Just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of how we got here and who's been working behind the scenes a little bit. It's been great to have, especially Will Kuhn, who all of you know, and is in Australia, putting in many, many hours of work on this, as well as working on his PhD. For the last year or so, he's been probably doing the lion's share of the work in this whole coalition. It's been great with Julie LaPiccolo. I've known Julie for a number of years now through the Orange County Task Force and the Jasper Ray Foundation. Julie has been a very quiet but very powerful person that keeps us grounded. She doesn't like to speak a lot, but when she does, her information is so valuable to us, and we couldn't be here without her. And then over to Megan Ferraro and the ZAC Foundation. I was introduced to Megan a couple of years ago when I was working with the National Water Safety Action Plan, and it's been a great relationship that Megan has brought with the ZAC Foundation to the Ben Carlson Foundation, and then bringing on board Matthew and Michael from ASG. Both those people have been steering this ship for the last 5 months, and we really wouldn't be here today without their work and without the work of Megan, who is really in the purpose of action in this space. So we wanted to thank all of those people and getting this here today. The other people we'd like to recognize too is we really started this venture about a year ago after the cancellation of the 2020 summit. And talking with Will Kuhn, we wanted to do something for 2021. Obviously, we thought maybe we could do it in the spring, and that was kind of put on hold. And then we thought maybe in the fall, this is where we're at. So we put together a good team of stakeholders in California and really started working and getting the information of what we needed to do to try to put this together. And I just wanted to recognize these individuals that you can see on your screen that have put in so much work behind the scenes, not only in their own areas, in their own fields, but with us to make us here and make us work today. So why are we here today? Basically, moving on is in 2014, the motivation for this California Water Safety Coalition, the World Health Organization put out a recommendation that each country develop a national water safety action plan. United States does not have one. There's many countries that do. Obviously, you can think of New Zealand, Australia, the UK, Canada, but even some third world countries like Bangladesh have this. And we're a little behind the times in seeing this. This was also reaffirmed a few months ago when the United Nations passed in their General Assembly a resolution on global drowning prevention. And so the National Water Safety Action Plan for the United States began about 2 years ago with the steering committee, which I'd like to pass over to Megan right now to kind of explain who she is and what she's done with the Water Safety Action Plan.
Thanks, Rob. So some of you may have attended the Vancouver Conference on Drowning Prevention in 2017. I know I did. And there I learned about what a lot of the countries that Rob mentioned were doing as it related to drowning prevention. So I came back to the ZAC Foundation's board and said, wow, this is something the United States really needs to start working toward, but we're just a small family foundation. So we decided to start small, as Karen mentioned, in the 4 communities where we began our drowning prevention action plans. And that was in spring of 2019. Shortly thereafter, the US National Water Safety Action Plan developed a steering committee to really guide the work of this National Water Safety Action Plan that is led by lots of experts from all across the country, including Rob Williams, chairs one of the working groups. And, you know, it's been a lot of effort. We have a lot of exciting work coming down the pike. And when Rob and Will and Chris came to the ZAC Foundation and asked for some support and some guidance to help California develop an action plan similar to what we're doing in different communities around the country, and to really get some pieces in place for the National Water Safety Action Plan, if that ends up being something that California implements, it seems like a natural next step for us. We've really been focused on trying to find where advocacy and education and awareness meet. And we are finding that through these community action plans, these state action plans, and on the national level, this is really where we're starting to see success and momentum. The work that's been done in California over the last 30 years as it relates to drowning prevention is incredible. It's some of the best work being done in the country and something that we've all been looking to, at least I have, in more than a decade of work in this space. So really excited to be here, excited to hear what you all have been working on over the last couple of months and learn more about the lessons you have learned over the last, decades that you've been in this work.
Thanks, Megan. That leads us to what we are here for. This vision has been worked on with the planning committee, and we came up with this to a central body to lead statewide strategy in the development, implementation, and evaluation of water safety policy, education, and programs across the age and developmental spectrum, bodies of water, activities, and California geography. This coalition has been basically built up to this, and this is a working description. It's not finalized yet until we get everything in our structures worked out and we start developing a mission statement. This is a work in progress, and we all understand that. We've had a lot of milestones in the past, and we've talked a little bit about that, but today it leads up to this workshop. Before today, we've had a lot of discussions, a lot of evaluations on how to do it, interviews with stakeholders, and really getting into what we want to do as a coalition and how we want to move forward based on that National Water Safety Action Plan. The work groups have met. I think each one of them met at least 3 times, maybe a couple more for some. And they have developed gaps and goals and actions to be put forward. And that's what you'll be learning today. Today, we're going to discuss and hopefully have a directional agreement on priorities and actions and structure. In between this next couple of days, we're going to be working more and seeing if we can fine tune some priorities and activities and developing some strategies and tactics. And this will all lead up to the official launch of this coalition. Right now, we are scheduled to hold our next summit, our second summit. Hopefully it won't be canceled or moved, but we are looking at February 23rd and 24th. Please ink those dates because we've already booked the Newport Beach Marriott. We are excited to have this group and a lot more come into a formal conference and basically launch this California Water Safety Coalition and get everybody together in this space in California. A couple other people we definitely want to recognize in this area is our working group chairs. And these people have been amazing. And it's only been the last month and a half, 6-8 weeks that they've been working on this, if not a little bit tighter timeline. They've been in this space for a long time, but what they've done and what they've done with their committees over the last 6 weeks has been tremendous. And so I just want to recognize Aaron with data and public health, Melissa with life jackets and personal flotation devices, Pete with lifeguards and supervision, Marcia and Marianne with the barriers, entrapment, electrical safety, Nicole with water safety, water competence, and swimming lessons, and Leslie and Kristen from CPR and rescue. All of you have done tremendous work, and it's been great to see what, and we will see what happens today with what has come out of those meetings. And for me, finally, just everybody else that has been involved in this organization and setting us up. And you can see that these people, all of you should be on this list, and we would not be here today without you. And there's some sort of information or advice or participation or action that you have given us and will give us in the future. So again, thank you very much for being on this conference call with us. And we're looking for fantastic things, especially in the next 4 to 6 months coming out of this workshop into the summit and the formal launch of this coalition. So I want to pass it back to Megan for a couple more comments.
Thanks, Rob. So as I said earlier, despite the challenges and the work ahead, California has been a leader in this space throughout the United States in advancing water safety, and one that other states, communities, and as we're building the National Action Plan, that we're looking to for insight and guidance. The efforts of this coalition will be building on that foundation, created in many ways by all of you on this call. There are some of you on this call, or some that weren't able to join, that have transformed the world of drowning prevention, like Nadina Rigsby, like the Jasper Ray Foundation, the Meow Meow Foundation. Some of this work that's been done has been really incredible. We look at LA County passing ordinances 20 and 21 as they relate to water safety being things we need to look toward. And most importantly and critically was the 1984 law that really was just critical in ensuring that backyard pools were safer than they were previously. There's, as we said, so much more work to be done. And all of that work will be successful by all of us working together and collaborating in this really unique space. So really excited to see everything that we have to share today and to participate over the next few days.
Hey, thank you so much, Megan and Rob, for setting our scene a little bit and really doing justice to those who've been putting the work in for this specific day in the past month, in the past couple of months. But also thank you, Megan, for acknowledging the incredible work that's gone on in this state for 30, 40 years. So, okay, we are going to move on. So Rob and Megan, thanks so much. We're going to move on now and talk a little bit about framing the issue is with some data. And I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about a study, an ongoing study. And I would like to start by saying, we did send some data slides beforehand. And the intent of sending those slides ahead was to get you thinking about this issue in our state. It's really important to note that these are preliminary results, and the analysis is ongoing and it continues to be refined. And I'm sitting here now, and part of me wishes that we didn't send those data slides out so early. But part of me is really happy I did, because several of you got back to me with some really important thoughts and comments. And I'd like to thank those of you that reached out who looked at those slides carefully. And there were a couple eagle eyes that caught some errors. So thank you for those helpful responses. There's going to be some forthcoming output from this research project, which will be peer reviewed. So I would advise you to wait to use any of this information in any sort of official capacity until those papers have come out. That is just to say that the slides that were sent out shouldn't be used in any official purpose. So the goal today for our time now is to help us start thinking about the scope of the problem in the state and potentially some new ways and perspectives in looking at the issue. So there's two things that I want you to take away from the next 10 minutes. One, drowning is a big problem in the state, and we have probably not been thinking about how big it is. I think that the size, scope, and impact is larger than we have traditionally thought. And hopefully you'll walk away from this portion of today thinking about that. Second, the details of each drowning event are absolutely critical for us to design effective interventions and countermeasures, whether they be education programs or programs for specific populations in the state. When we start to look at those details, however, they are very diverse. And what I mean by that is that there is a range of types of drowning circumstances. And when we drill down into each of those details, they're quite complex. And we can approach this issue from multiple different perspectives. The other thing with these details is that you're going to see some really important information today, which will be helpful to learn. But what is striking is what's still unknown. So one, drowning is a big problem, probably bigger than we thought. Two, the details are very important. They are diverse, complex, and there's still a lot of unknowns. So I'm going to start with this. There's a paper that came out a couple of years ago from New Zealand where a drowning prevention researcher, kind of came up with this idea called the iceberg phenomenon. And today, right now, we are only talking about drowning deaths. But it is critically important that we realize that death is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the top part of the problem, right? Someone can drown and live and have some sort of neurological deficit for the rest of their life, right? So there are all these range of non-fatal drowning injuries. Someone can drown, go to a hospital, see a paramedic, be cared for by a lifeguard and have no issues, right? We've got loads of rescues. There's bystander rescues. There's all these other kind of close call submersion incidents. So I'd just like you to remember that when you see numbers today, just remember that this is a fraction of the problem. Okay. We don't really need to get too far into this, but the reason that I'm showing you this is that these are the ICD-10 codes, which are related to drowning. And ICD-10 codes are a way for people to mark on a death certificate the causes of death. Now, traditionally, drowning, when you've heard drowning statistics, it is most likely that those drowning statistics came from that green box, the red box with green background. These are unintentional drowning deaths, but importantly, what's not included in those deaths are boating accidents and victims of flood or other natural disasters. The other thing that's not included in there is intentional drowning deaths, so suicide and unfortunately assault, homicide by drowning. And then this load of cases where the coroner knows the person drowned, but they don't know the intent, so they mark that Y21 undetermined. So file that in the back of your head that there's this traditional approach, which is that red box, but there's also all these other drowning deaths that are out there. The second thing that's kind of important to remember is that when we talk about drowning statistics, most of the time, we are talking about the underlying cause of death. So that would be like the primary main cause of death. But on the death certificate, the person filling out the form can put in multiple causes of death. And a good example of this would be a car drives off a road into a river and the driver drowns. That death is most likely going to have an underlying cause that is something related to a motor vehicle accident. But in the other causes of death, you'll see some drowning cause. So remember that we've got this traditional look where we're only looking at part of the problem, and then we've got a whole other series of cases where drowning might be a subsequent cause of death. So if we take a look over the past of 2005 to 2019 at that traditional kind of narrow scope, there was just over 6,000 drowning deaths in the state. This is residents and non-residents. These are deaths that occurred in the state in that time period. If you take that kind of refined look, but if you expand the scope out and include those other unintentional categories, you include intentional drownings, undetermined deaths, and you include those other underlying causes, there's a lot more cases. So taking that kind of more restricted approach means that we're missing about 30% of the problem. And this is something that I'd like you to walk away from today, is that we need to start expanding our view of what drowning is in our state. There are 15% of the cases in this study's time period that had an other underlying cause, right? So about 6.5%, that's almost 600 cases, were due to some sort of non-drowning transport, like the car that drove off the road into the river. About 10% of the total drowning deaths were intentional. So this is suicide and this is assault by drowning. And then 4.5% were undetermined. Okay, let's blast through to the details. So complex, diverse, and unknowns. So this issue is definitely affecting children. That you can see that big spike on the left side of your screen under 5. And then, like almost every other region on the planet, males drown at significantly higher numbers than females. But when you start to look at rates, so now this is the drowning rate per 100,000 population of residents only. So we've taken out all of the non-residents. Our elderly population is actually drowning at the highest rate. So even though they have lower numbers than some other ages, they are drowning at higher rates. This is a complex problem. Understanding the race of those who drown is really important for prevention. And I just like to note here that I'm going to use the race categories that are presented in the California Comprehensive Master Death File, which is where these data came from. And it's just important to know that these race categories, while they're helpful, they are quite simple, and they do not capture the variation and the complexities of how individuals define themselves. And so there is some room for misclassification. So as you kind of start to think about these race slides, I just note that this is helpful, but and we're getting towards the truth, but there's definitely room for some error in here. Okay, jumping into it. So you can see that non-Hispanic white population drowns, has the most number of drownings on the left side of the screen. But when you look at the rates on the right hand of the screen, you can see our non-Hispanic Black population and our non-Hispanic other group, which includes American Indian, Alaskan Native, Hawaiian, and other Pacific Islander, and some other race categories. Those other groups are drowning at the same or higher rates than our non-Hispanic white population. And this is where it gets complex. If we break that down by age, you can see that our Hispanic population under 20 is drowning in the same numbers as our non-Hispanic white population. And as we move further as people get older, those numbers start to split. Complex. Okay, another super important element of this problem is where. So on the map on the right, I'd like you to try and find your region. These are the California census regions. On the left, you can see the number of drowning events. Complex. The North Coast has the fewest number of drowning events. But when we look at the rates, the North Coast has the highest drowning rate in the state. Okay, complex. San Francisco Bay has the most number of drowning events. But when we start to drill into what's happening in the Bay, over 30% of those drowning deaths are intentional. Okay, so this just, again, I hope this is drilling home the point that as we start to look into these details, this is complex. Another critical important a component of this problem is what bodies of water people are drowning in. Now, I just have to say that from death data, it is very difficult to actually get where the bodies of water in which people are drowning. There's a natural water category, which means that rivers, coasts, lakes, and ponds are all grouped together. On the death certificate, there's an open text section where whoever's filling out that form can type or write in person drowned at a beach, person drowned at such and such beach, such and such lake. So I developed a little bit of an algorithm to scrape through those and try and auto classify them, but still required me to go through and manually review over 3,000 cases to get this graph in front of you. Okay, so capturing the body of water information is quite difficult. As you can see, pool drowning deaths dominate the state, but complex. When we break this down by different regions, you can see that open bodies of water, coast or river, are making up the majority of drowning deaths in the North Coast, Superior, California, the Bay Area, the San Joaquin Valley, and then the urban centers in LA, the Inland Empire, and Orange County is where you see those really high proportions of pool drowning deaths. Okay, again, breaking this down by age, you can see that children on the left side of the screen are drowning mostly in pools and bathtubs. There's this dip that occurs, between 5 and 14, and then it starts to spike up again with those open bodies of water, right? So rivers and lakes spiking quite high in the late teen and early 20s, and then you can see that as we go through the age spectrum. Okay, so the details are complex. The drowning situations in this state are quite diverse, and hopefully you've been thinking about what's not in these data. So death data is super helpful. We're learning a lot, but it's not telling us the whole story, okay? And what we need for good, solid, effective interventions is that information from the scene. We need to know things like, did the child drown in a pool? Was that pool a home pool, apartment complex, public pool? Was there a lifeguard on duty? Was there a barrier? Was there a fence? Was the gate working? Was the gate broken? So these sorts of data points are absolutely essential, and they're very hard to get. They do exist, but it takes a lot of work to link these up. So I'd like to impress upon you that while we are learning from these death data, it's not telling us the whole story. I just want to bring you back to this iceberg. We're really scratching the surface here. The problem is bigger and a little bit more complex than we thought. And there's some really exciting research happening with some very smart colleagues. I've had the pleasure of working with Orion Stewart from the California Department of Public Health and with Dr. Tessa Clemens from the for the Center for Disease Control on this project, as well as some drowning prevention researchers, Dr. Amy Pete and Dr. Rob Brander. So as output is released from this project, we'll keep you all updated on that. We're planning on doing some more specific research into the race, ethnicity, socioeconomic component of this problem, an entire paper focused only on pediatrics, a paper focused on the rivers. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd love to hear your ideas. Please send me an email or drop them in the chat and I can answer them as we go. Okay, I'm tired of talking. It is my pleasure to move us on now and introduce Matthew and Michael from ASG Advisors. Mike and Matt have been an incredible help. Many of you will have been working with them for the past several months. They've been like, an extra boost of fuel to this effort. So I think Mike is going to go first. Mike, could you introduce yourself first before you jump in? And thank you for joining us.
You bet. Thanks so much, Will, and appreciate you giving us a chance to speak to the landscape analysis here. On behalf of my colleague and partner, Matthew Barnes, we appreciate this opportunity. It has been such a privilege to work with Will and Rob and Megan and Karen and Julie and Chris Carlson and so many of you who are in the attendee section of the Zoom list here. We've talked with so many of you. You've helped inform the landscape analysis that I'm about to walk through at a high level, and we are just so impressed by your tremendous experience and commitment and passion for this issue. So thank you for having us along for this very important ride. Here on this slide, as I said, we're going to be speaking about the landscape analysis that we at ASG Advisors have been conducting on behalf of the California Water Safety Coalition. Again, along with my partner, Matthew Barnes, who will be jumping onto the screen shortly and who many of you have connected with over the past several months, what we've done here is begun developing a comprehensive list, a dynamic list, a growing list of individuals and organizations across California that are stakeholders in water safety and drowning prevention, trying to get that full picture of individuals and organizations involved in this space. We started with a list, a not so small list provided by Will and Rob, gathered a lot of input from interviews and a survey that went out, and also conducted our own desktop research. And this list, which you see on your screen, of course, it includes the usual suspects, all of you, of course, but also some non-traditional stakeholders, folks like home inspectors or homeowners associations and so forth. All of these stakeholders are going to be critical to shaping a relevant and comprehensive water safety strategy in the state. And just as importantly, these stakeholders will and should cut across California geography, cut across the different bodies of water, cut across the different activities in the water, and cut across various demographic indicators. And what you see on your screen here is a partial list of the stakeholders by type. Again, we emphasize that this is an evolving and an incomplete list, but this really is a cross-section of stakeholders that are described here, from the various state agencies at far left and authorities, to the hospital systems, the local organizations, the task forces, many of whom are on this call, industry partners, the philanthropic community is critical, as we heard at the top of this call, the nonprofit sector, and the non-traditional, boating, fishing, etc. Looking at the next slide, the desktop review of organizations. Through this research, we have identified 162 organizations and 292 individual contacts that we took a deeper dive at, a deeper look at. And what you see here is the sector breakdown of these folks. So of the constellation of water safety and drowning prevention organizations in California, there is, as you can see on your screen, sort of a heavy emphasis on marine safety, ocean safety, lifeguarding, as well as a variety of nonprofit groups. Going to the next slide, we're going to speak a little bit about what these organizations are doing. Many of these folks, as you see at the top of your screen, are in the lifeguard community, rescue professionals. There's also a heavy emphasis on education across organizations, and a little bit less emphasis towards the bottom there on things such as boating, advocacy, which I think we're going to be talking about later in the day, safety equipment and products. So you sort of see the difference in emphasis in what it is these organizations are doing. On the next slide here, we look at the demographic representation. I would point out that a relatively small number of organizations that we've looked at are focused on minority populations, just 4 at the top right there in the blue box. On the left, you'll see a breakdown by ages. There's a critical mass of organizations focused on children, comparatively very few focused on adults. Something to think about as we go through the rest of these slides. With respect to socioeconomic factors, we found 7 organizations of the 162 specifically focused on low-income populations. Again, something to think about as we think about our goals, actions, and priorities. So we're going to move to the next slide, but these are some stats worth hanging on to and thinking about, and how they might inform our work going forward, particularly around which groups may require added emphasis or special emphasis. Here we see the geography and bodies of water, our geographic breakdown. This might not be a surprise to most, but we see that most water safety and drowning prevention organizations in the state are based in and or serving Southern California. To the right, you see that oceans, open water, occupy the major focus, followed by pools. And that inland open water is a potential area in need. And I know we're going to talk about it again later in the day. Lastly, we come to our takeaways here, some highlights on what we've learned. Again, most of the water safety and drowning prevention organizations in California are in that health and safety space. Most are focused on Southern California, the southern part of the state. Most are focused on open water, specifically the beach, the ocean, the coast. We were encouraged through our research that education and curriculum is largely consistent in terms of what they are teaching around safety. There's not great variation in curriculum. And children remain the focus for more organizations, at least those focused on a specific age group. The main gaps, as we see them here at the bottom, are the limited focus on things such as inland open water, lakes, rivers, canals, adults, and areas outside of Southern California. So that's our desktop review. This information was, this came from the survey we conducted, the interviews, our own desktop review, and it gives us a good summary or a sense of the organizations that currently exist that are working in the water space. I'm going to turn it over to Matthew Barnes at this point to talk in a little more detail.
Excellent. Next slide, Will. Terrific. So we took care to reach out to and identify a subset of the organizations and individuals that Mike spoke to get their perspective on what a coalition like this should be endeavoring to take on, what its priorities should be. And so through a mix of interviews and surveys, we heard from 33 stakeholders across regions of the state, bodies of water, activities, and age groups on what they see as the big needs in the state and what ought to be the priorities for a coalition like this. Also hearing from them what they think the impediments are to creating and sustaining a coalition. Next. So we had 10 questions in the interview, in the survey script, I should say the interview script and the survey, to really sort of get their view on whether a coalition like the one we're describing in the top right is worth creating, and that the description of it is appropriate for the task before us. And to see if they had any specific suggestions for changes to that description. What should be the priorities and the activities of an organization like this? Who and what organization should be part of it? What are the main challenges and obstacles and ways to overcome them? And then, of course, gauging people's interest and availability in supporting the coalition. Next slide. So regarding the description, there's essentially universal agreement that it was on target. It was suggested, for instance, that we add developmental spectrum in addition to age spectrum, which we've done. With respect to mission, several folks felt the coalition should focus on policy development and should collaborate with other organizations who are focused on child safety and welfare. And then, of course, we're encouraged to dial up an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. Next slide. In terms of what the top priorities should be, building an inclusive and cohesive coalition that works in common purpose, where there is an effective coordination and accessibility and a place for all stakeholders, sharing of data and resources and policy efforts among coalition members. Next, community and public education, parent and child education, a focus on high-risk populations and swim lessons. The sense was that it should engage in policy development and change, connect to legislative leaders, policy change for water safety and swimming lessons, drowning prevention and other drowning prevention infrastructure, improving data collection and surveillance, identify gaps in data, commission or sponsor data research and analysis, create a central data hub for folks to use and determine whether various interventions are effective, what are the actual data gaps, and a standardization of data collection requirements across the state. Next slide. In the interest of time, we can go to the next slide, Will. So with respect to the challenges and obstacles to creating a coalition like this, time is a precious resource for people, but folks indicated that they could contribute a median about 3 hours a month. Some indicated significantly more. There was concern expressed about getting agreement around a set of priorities. This is a sensible concern, but the key is to focus our efforts and our energies around those areas where there is agreement, and to set aside, put in a parking lot, those areas where there remains disagreement. What is not taken up today can be taken up later. In fact, it's the evolution of an organization like this, an evolution of its priorities and focus that keeps the stakeholders engaged and the work engaging. We need to make sure we are inclusive and creative how we grow the coalition and who's at the table. And then, of course, planning for and maintaining financial sustainability is no small task. Final slide. So key takeaways, top priorities: building an inclusive and cohesive coalition that works in common purpose, educating the public, engaging in policy development and change, and improving research, data collection, and surveillance. Specific goals: standardization of public messaging across different aspects of water safety, creating a central accessible repository of drowning and water safety related data to inform and to serve as a data source for additional and new research and analysis, and related advocacy efforts to improve the data landscape and understanding of risks and effective interventions, educational campaigns for parents and children. Major challenges: getting people's time and attention and making best use of it so that they stay engaged, ensuring diversity and inclusion is embedded so that our coalition's work is relevant to a diverse California, and finding and maintaining financial sustainability. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you, Matthew and Mike. Just for those of you who are watching this, a large amount of work has gone into that, into this work, and Mike and Matt did a really nice job of trimming it down to about 12 minutes. Just know that there were hours and hours and hours that have gone into that, and there's a lot more information that has provided us with a really great foundation. So we can start this coalition off intentionally listening, intentionally learning, and get off on the right foot. So thank you, Matthew and Mike. All right, we are going to jump now before our break. I would like to invite Tizzy Bennett to join us. So for those of you that don't know, Tizzy is a water safety life jacket queen royalty. And I'm so happy that she could join us today. About 2 months ago, I asked Tizzy if she would embark on a project with me as Matthew and Mike looked internal to the state to do some learning about where California was at. Tizzy and I did some learning external to the state. And so Tizzy and I did 8 interviews with statewide Water Safety Coalition leaders from different places. We actually also interviewed someone from the UK and someone from Canada. You can listen to all those interviews. I'm going to drop a link now into the chat. And then Tizzy and I actually recorded an additional interview that's a reflection conversation with Justin Scarr, who's a global advocate. So Tizzy, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself, and then I want to jump into 3 of your big takeaways in the 6 or 7 minutes we have left. So can you introduce yourself for everyone?
Sure, Will. And I do have to start all of my conversations with you by saying,
Okay.
hi, Will.
Hi, Tizzy.
Here we
Good to
are
be-
again. As Will said, I have been in the drowning prevention and coalition space for the last 30 years, including starting the Washington Drowning Prevention Network in the early 1990s. And fast forward to today, where I am co-chairing the life jacket, personal flotation device, and other flotation working group, working with Megan and Rob and many others for the United States National Water Safety Action Plan. So we're going to talk just for a few minutes about some big takeaways. Here's one that I have, and actually I thought Mike and Matthew did such a great job of queuing this up, and that's about the role of state and local, and how they complement each other and how they come together. And a couple of the big things that came out in multiple interviews was around the state role of connecting people, of looking around consistent messaging, of identifying resources that are working in one place and sharing that with another place that may be interested.
This came out in a lot of the interviews. I mean, and off the top of my head, Texas, Arizona, and Florida are doing this really well. And in those conversations, it made me think about the local coalitions that we have. I mean, we have strong and robust coalitions in San Diego, in Orange County, in the Inland Empire, in Riverside, the Central Valley Fresno Water Safety Coalition, and there's a really active group of water safety advocates on the North Coast in Mendocino, Humboldt, Del Norte. And I probably missed some folks. I know that there's some really important work happening in San Francisco and in Sacramento as well. But one of the things that I kept thinking about was how these groups are connected and how they're learning from each other. And to that point, Tizzy, right, taking a program like Mike Filson has in Chula Vista, where the fire departments are really involved in water safety, and looking at that and saying, okay, is that going to work in San Luis Obispo? Well, this piece and that piece won't, but this is great. We're going to take that. And so if this coalition can, like Florida and Texas and Arizona, do a good job of building those bridges and connecting people, I think that that's a huge success. Second big takeaway from Tizzy.
Second is, what an opportunity. Your timing is so perfect with the launch of the United States National Water Safety Action Plan planned for sometime in the latter part of 2022. This opportunity to queue up and come together and get to know each other and make those connections and build those relationships. And then as you're doing, to take what hundreds and hundreds of people are working on around evidence-based recommendations at a state level in particular for this coalition, but also what does it mean at a county and at a local level? That is phenomenal, because it will really jumpstart a plan, and you can take what makes sense for you in California. But I think that's really a great opportunity. And we heard plan, strategy, vision, mission. Those came out in so many of the interviews that we did.
You're right. And they did come out in the interviews, and on the timing piece, it really drives home the fact that all of the folks in these interviews stressed how much work that is to do that planning and to come up with that strategy. And in about a year or under a year, when the National Water Safety Plan drops, we are going to have on a silver platter for us a ton of work that's already been done. So I think, yeah, we do have a really incredible opportunity. And then linking it back to your first takeaway, to take those from the national level and say, hey, this is going to be great for the state. This is not going to work in San Diego, or this is not going to work in San Francisco, or maybe we can tweak this and make it work in the Inland Empire, right? And so I think having a platform from which to do that is going to serve us well as we start to implement and think about that National Water Safety Action Plan a little bit more intentionally. Tizzy, third big takeaway.
I am reminded every day, and I sure was in these interviews, about how important it is to listen and to learn. And for as long as I have been working in coalitions with around water safety and drowning prevention, I personally learned a lot and thought that every interview that we did had incredibly valuable things for us to reflect on. I did appreciate Mike and Matthew's phrase, representative but not exhaustive, that idea for everything that we heard and learned, there is more to be done. And we certainly walked away with some of the same reflections that the last presentation did, that Mike and Matthew found in their surveys around what are we hearing about the needs of diverse communities, and how do we build on their strengths and their assets to come to the table and help us learn about working with communities who may be experiencing higher rates of drowning, yet have so many strengths to bring to the table.
Just to cue it up as learning and listening, I think is so important, and something that I've been thinking a lot about as I've been reflecting on these interviews as almost a core value, right? And a culture and an ethos that we are learning and we are listening. And I hope that everybody who's involved in this, if this is the first time you're tuning in, just watching this, if you've been involved in a work group, if you've been leading a work group, I hope that we can really instill that culture of learning and listening. And I hope that those of us who are leading this effort can model that too, right? Learning and listening. Okay, Tizzy, we are about to go on a break. I, again, would just like to thank you so much for your time and your thought and your guidance and your mentorship, not only personally for me, but also for this group. Your thoughts and your insight into this interview process have been so valuable and have given us a lot to consider. So thank you so much for all of your time and your wisdom in this space.
Thank you, Will. And best wishes, everyone. I'm so excited to see what comes next for you.
Great. And just one more quick plug. If you have listened to the interviews, there is a 9th interview that's up with Justin Scar, where we're not specifically talking about Australia. It's more of a reflection conversation and a big picture conversation. Okay, we are going to head on a break. So we're going to come back at 1:15. The Zoom webinar is going to stay up. So we're not closing anything out. Everything is staying up just the way it is. I'm going to turn my camera off and mute, and we will come back in 15 minutes. So go get a coffee, go do some push-ups, go walk your dog or whatever you need to do. We will be back here in 15 minutes. All right. Thanks, everyone.